So I want to start with a few caveats. One is that this is going to be a video focused on United States opportunities for 1L summer jobs. I'm not going to be touching on Europe. I'm not really going to be touching on international opportunities at all. That's not to say that if you are in the United States at a United States law school and you want to do something international, that it's not an option. In fact, a lot of law students do take those opportunities and they do exist, but most of my experience and knowledge is US based. So this video is US focused. And the second disclaimer is that you guys really need to remember that the 1L summer job, internship, whatever it is that you end up doing, it really does not matter in the long run. I really can't emphasize this enough. It's easy when you're a 1L to feel like, oh, what am I going to do over this summer internship? It's so important. It's the first sort of metric that I can measure myself as, succeeding or failing at in law school. And like your imagination really runs away with you in that way. But I can't emphasize this enough, guys. It does not matter. It quite literally makes no impact in your later legal career, whatever field it is that you go into in the law. Now, probably the most common opportunity people do over their 1L summer is work at a law firm, whether it's a smaller law firm, a mid-sized law firm, or a big law firm. Now, this is probably the most common because there are the most opportunities for 1L summer associates or law clerks, as they're called, at these law firms, whether they're small, medium, or large. This is also good exposure and experience for you as a law student because you don't really get insight into what it is to work as an attorney or what it's like to work at a law firm until you actually do it. And some of the first times you're able to actually practice that type of work, do legal research, help drafting documents, sitting in on client calls, it's going to be when you're a law clerk or a summer associate. So these positions are pretty popular. I do recommend them. Most of the time they are paid. Now, they're not usually paid at the level of summer associate programs at big law firms, which tend to pay you at the prorated scale of a first-year associate in big law, which in some cases can be $40,000 to $50,000 in a single summer.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
Cha-ching. But it's still really good experience even if you're only getting paid $25 an hour, $30 an hour. In fact, my 1L summer was at DLA Piper, which was a big law firm, but at the time they were only paying us roughly $30 an hour when we were 1Ls, and then when we were 2Ls we got paid more. These are great opportunities, and you can decide at your juncture of looking at what part of the law do you want to practice. Do you want to do transactional work? Do you want to do bankruptcy work? Do you want to do personal injury and plaintiff side work? Do you want to litigate? This opportunity, your 1L summer, that's a time where you can think to yourself, you know what, maybe I'm going to try out transactional work and I'll go work at a transactional law firm. Maybe I want to litigate, I'll go to a litigation-based shop. Really good experience in that regard to get yourself some of that exposure into what your actual day-to-day life might look like, watching the attorneys and kind of like what their job looks and feels like. Is that appealing to you? That's how you can find out. Go to a law firm for your 1L summer.
There he is.
Wait, is that our lawyer? I thought he was in jail.
Hey, perfect timing. I just completed the detailing on this Kia.
The second bucket is working for a justice or a judge in what's called a judicial externship or internship. It really kind of just depends on the actual judge that offers it to you. The terms don't really matter. But the bottom line is when you work for a judge or a justice of a court, you are basically doing most of the time legal research and writing, and you're helping either the justice or the judge themselves or some of their full-time clerks with drafting opinions of cases that that judge or justice is deciding. This sounds pretty cool, and that's because it kind of is. I mean, it's not often that you get to actually hold the pen and write an opinion that will become binding law on a specific set of parties in front of you. And if you're at an appeals court or a Supreme Court of a jurisdiction like a state, that law may well become precedent that now other lawyers have to follow. Kind of cool that you get your hand in that process, if you ask me. Downsides here of working for a judge or a justice is usually, especially for the 1L summer opportunities, it's unpaid. So you're going to be working pretty hard, like usually 40 hours a week, probably more. Some of the judges I've heard can be pretty intense too, especially if you go to like the Court of Appeals and at the Supreme Court level, obviously. But it's a good amount of work and you're not paid. And it's also pretty competitive to get these positions because there just aren't that many in the United States total. We only have so many justices and judges. And then even of those justices and judges, only some of them actually take on law clerks as 1L summers. So when you get down to the level of spots that exist, they're tough to get because of that. It's not the most attractive option. My 2 cents to you guys is like, if you really want to go into academia, if you really want to be a judge or a justice, then go ahead and invest the time and apply to all these judges out there and see if if you can get that experience, because that is as close to that practice of laws you're going to get. And it's going to look really good on your resume when eventually you turn around later and say, hey, you know what? I want to be a judge or a justice. I want to go into the court system. I want to be an academic. A lot of justices and judges, they're academics, they're law professors, and then eventually they get appointed to be a judge. So it looks great for that. But if you're not that interested in that side of the legal space, I wouldn't really invest a ton of time in it. Again, just because it tends to be really competitive, not because all the most competitive applicants are going for these spots, but because there just aren't that many. All right, the third bucket, and this is what I would do now if I were a 1L summer, is work in-house at a company in the legal department of the company. And when I say in-house, that's a term of art that just means that you're working in the legal department of a company. Company like Google, Paramount, Universal Studios, Sony, the camera I'm filming on. It really doesn't matter. But the bottom line is you're going to be an attorney or a law clerk helping the legal department of a specific company. And you get a lot of really good exposure when you work in-house to the business and the operational side of a company instead of purely just practicing law and doing research and drafting. And that's really important for a lot of reasons. One is that like the law firm setting is very specific. When you're in the law firm setting, you're just practicing law for different clients, kind of doing the same things over and over. In my opinion, you don't tend to really build a lot of the soft skills, the politicking, the diplomacy, and the operational quirks that are required when you exit a big law firm or a law firm in general and are now thrust into a corporation with a corporate structure and a corporate bureaucracy. So when you work in-house, you're going to get direct exposure to that. And you're also going to get to see that when you're a lawyer at a company, you are not necessarily doing what law firms and lawyers that are practicing law in law firms are doing at all. Sometimes you're actually the one managing the outside counsel, aka the lawyers at these other law firms that your company has hired to help you with the cases. So you get to be more of a quarterback in these roles relative to when you're just practicing law at a law firm. That's one reason I think it's helpful, okay, is learning all of these soft skills, learning how to navigate the corporate bureaucracy, really important. But the other thing that's cool about it is it's just a neat experience. You know, getting to work at innovative and cool companies, I think is so different than a law firm where, for the most part, don't get me wrong, okay, my law firm, For Creators by Creators, where we represent content creators and entrepreneurs, we're doing some things that are more innovative, we're doing some things that are different, but we're still a law firm. And law firms in general tend to be more or less the same business model when you copy paste one and look at another one. It's they have clients, they service clients, they charge money to service the clients, they make money and they move on. Whereas when you're at some of these other companies doing crazy stuff, being part of that environment is enriching. And I think that when you have a time like your 1L summer that really is explorative, you don't need to be doing anything specific. This really is a time for you to enrich your mind and enrich your development in your career before you really dive in after you graduate. In-house can be a great experience, especially for those of you who might be a little more entrepreneurial. You know, being in-house, you're going to get that business experience and exposure, and you're going to get that energy of being in a startup. You're going to get that energy of being at a company that, for the most part, I'm generalizing here, but for the most part, are focused on growth and exponential growth, not just like linear small number growth. So that's the third bucket. It's going in-house at a company for your 1L summer. I know plenty of people that do this, and I frankly have not heard of folks that haven't enjoyed this process. All right, the fourth bucket is being a research assistant or a research associate under a law school professor. Now, usually this is for a professor that is at your law school. I have not really seen people do research associate or assistant positions with professors that are not at their law school. I'm not saying you can't. I've never seen that. So typically it's at your own law school where you work under a professor, and that's helping them with basically preparing and researching for legal scholarly papers or articles that they're putting together. Sometimes it even could be a textbook or a book that they're writing.
Ms. Woods, you did well today.
Really?
You're applying for my internship, aren't you?
I don't know.
You should. Do you have a resume?
Yes, I do.
And that entails, it's a lot of research, right? It's researching either history, it's researching court cases, it's researching potentially, statutes and regulations and how they interplay, but it's a lot of research. Opportunities like this tend not to be paid. And sometimes law schools will offer you like a pay stipend to make up for the fact that you're not making money helping these professors. Sometimes they're paid, but again, most of the time from what I've seen, they're not. And I do think, with these positions, there is some element of it being like a backstop backstop or a fallback in case you don't find a 1L summer position elsewhere that really resonates with you. Now, I'm not saying that everyone who does it as a fallback. Not at all. I have plenty of classmates of mine at my law school that wanted to research under professors because they wanted to build a reputation with them. They wanted to get that experience. All fine and good. At the same time, I think law schools tend to provide this opportunity to most of their law students, just in case the student doesn't find something that they like, or maybe in the rare case, someone just doesn't find a 1L summer job. But in any event, I do think there's some of that element of it being a backstop. So check in with your law school to see if this type of thing is offered. And you might even consider lining it up in advance, again, just in case you don't find anything else that's better. But one other thing to think about on these roles is that they do tend to be part-time. Some of them are full-time, but I think most of them are part-time. So what I've seen a lot of people do is they mix their research assistant or research internship position with doing a part-time role, either at a law firm or a nonprofit or something else. And so it tends to be a pretty low stress experience being, a research assistant or intern. And you also get to usually hang out on campus, or sometimes I think do it fully remote. It probably depends on the professors. But that's the fourth bucket, being a research assistant or research associate. All right, fifth bucket is the public interest or nonprofit bucket. Let me just start with the obvious. If you're going to work in the nonprofit or the public interest world, and by public interest, I mean the public defender's office, I mean pro bono legal services. If you're going to work in these areas, you should not expect to be paid anything. Most of these places don't have the funds for that. And you're a 1L summer intern or a law clerk, you don't really have skills to contribute a whole lot, to these organizations. Some law schools do offer a stipend, similar to what we just talked about for research. If you do this type of role, they'll give you like $5,000 or $10,000 or something just to hold you over. So definitely check with your law schools on that. But these roles can be really good experience, even though you're going to be thrown in the deep end. And this was my experience. I worked at My Sister's House, which is a nonprofit that helps women and survivors of domestic violence in the Sacramento area. I worked there for about a month when I was in law school, and you get a lot of firsthand exposure working in these places, especially as a law clerk, because you're really needed, truly. Your effort, your energy, your commitment is really needed. So I think if your goal is really to use your law degree to fight for good, and you're not afraid, because it does take a lot of courage to help some of these clients hear about what they're going through. This is like as serious a stuff as you can imagine. Then these roles are the most enriching in terms of real hands-on experience and exposure. Now, caveat what I just said, not every single role is going to be the same. I have had some of my friends who have complained that working at a certain nonprofit, for example, they get siloed into doing some really boring, just menial sort of research-oriented tasks for a whole summer. They don't feel like they did anything helpful, and they never even went back to the nonprofit sector after that. Like, they were so turned off by their experience there that they went into corporate big law afterwards. So what will be a good gauge on figuring this out, how much experience exposure you're going to get, is how big is the institution or organization. If you're going to a giant nonprofit, take like the Gates Foundation. I mean, at that point, you're working at like a company. That's like an in-house role with a philanthropic purpose. It's a big structure. There's like hundreds of employees. I wouldn't expect to get a lot of firsthand exposure. But if you go and you work for a legal aid services clinic that has one lawyer and like 2 other employees, and they're part of a nonprofit in a town of like 50,000 people, well, now I think you can expect that you're going to get a lot of good exposure and experience. Of course, again, this depends on how much latitude that person and that team gives you, and it depends on if the caseload is high. Maybe they're not really busy the summer you go there. Maybe they're lighter. But by and large, what I've seen is that those are the places that, because they quite literally need your help, they're going to be willing to give you a longer leash and learn and interview clients and take down case notes and draft pleadings and really get your hands dirty in the law. Could also be very draining, so keep that in mind. Now let's talk about some non-legal options, because there are non-legal options for things to do your 1L summer. And typically, the folks that I know that did non-legal internships are consulting, they're banking, they're finance, or they're just straight up inside of a startup, like working as a co-founder or helping as like the interim chief operating officer, or in some cases, chief legal officer, which is very scary to think about a 1L summer doing legal stuff. It's kind of scary, but I've seen it before. Startups are scrappy. So, these roles, I'm not going to dive too deep on them because this is not my realm, okay? Being a consulting intern, finance intern, banking intern, etc. But I will say the folks that have done these roles are typically the ones that don't see themselves practicing law in the long term. So the friends that I know that did these roles, and I'm talking about working at banks like JP Morgan, I'm talking about going to consulting firms like BCG, like Bain, like these folks ended up doing business full time, whether as a consultant or a banker, or they went and they founded their own company after law school. Very few of them went into big law and became practicing lawyers, or went into academia and became, judges later on. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing these roles. I think it's enriching. You probably make good money from what I've heard. I think it's good experience. I don't think law firms or interviewers, employers are going to judge you. I don't think they're going to say, well, you didn't even do anything legal over your summer. How do we expect you're going to be legal now? You might get the question like, oh, I noticed you didn't do anything legal over your 1L summer. Can you tell me why? Like, I think that's kind of a fair question if a lawyer's the one interviewing you for a legal role. But I don't think you're going to lose anything, quote unquote, by going to do these alternative routes that are on the business side that are non-legal. I'll kind of leave it at that again, mainly because this is not my field. I'm not going to say what I don't know. Okay, the last area, and this isn't really a bucket, but I just kind of wanted to caveat everything I've said with this, which is there is the prospect that you might consider doing something that is just completely non-traditional. By that, I mean, maybe you want to be a translator in another country. Maybe you just want to go work retail for a summer and you do something that's just off the beaten path, not legal at all, not prestigious or like structured in the way a business internship is. And my thoughts on that are this, guys. I think if you can avoid doing something like that your 1L summer, you should avoid it, because employers of all shapes and sizes in the legal world, people in the legal world tend to be very risk averse. They tend to be very structured. All of us went on this conveyor belt our whole careers, undergrad, law school, big law, or mid law, or clerk, whatever, into the next thing. And like, there's definitely a bias towards that sort of traditional pathway, that certainty that these people feel and they see when they see an applicant that did, a traditional usual law firm job, or, a traditional consulting gig. So I would just say, like, really do your best to try to do something, even if it's a part-time gig, even if it's a research role that's unpaid, just to check that box for those old school people out there who are going to be evaluating your resume. All right, we've talked about all of these different job types. Now let's talk about how you actually get them. And I'm not going to lie, I did quite a bit of research into this, guys, and it's not at all clear how to get some of these opportunities, because so many of these different actors in the spaces we've been talking about, like law firms and judges, companies that have in-house roles, they all do things their own way. So I will link some resources and some of these portals down below in the caption of this video. But the first thing I want to just tell you is you gotta just apply, because a lot of these opportunities, they will just sort through applications and take ones that look the most appealing, right? They'll look at like the law school you go to, they'll look at your undergrad, they'll look at the cover letter. You don't even get that opportunity if you don't apply. Okay. So obviously you want to apply. You want to apply early. Some of these opportunities, the window of applications close in like December of your 1L year, and that's pretty crazy. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, that's like a bit too early for me. I think if I were in your shoes, I would just not even touch those, because your final exams for your 1L semester, your grades from that year are so much more valuable than getting a 1L summer job. If I haven't said it enough in this video, I'll say it again, your 1L summer job really does not matter. So that's gonna be, I think, where most of the work here is in getting these roles, is just finding out where all of these positions are posted, having ChatGPT and you work together to come up with a good cover letter, hitting apply to all these different opportunities. That's where most of the work is to get these roles. And that is really how a lot of people do get them. But a big fat but, the thing that can really set you apart, the thing that can get you your dream role at any company or opportunity, wherever it is that you want to judge, etc., it's going to be networking. And when I was in law school, I hated to hear that word, because I used to be super, super socially anxious. And the prospect that like my ability to click with someone I just met and like schmooze my way through a room would actually contribute meaningfully to my employment terrified me, because I'm the type that I just wanted to put my head in the book, do what I'm told, get the best grades, and then get the opportunity handed to me on a silver platter. But here's the thing, networking doesn't really mean shaking someone's hand and chumming them up. Like these days, now I do that because I run my own law firm, and to get clients, some of that helps. And I like it now. I've kind of worked on the anxiety. But when you're in your shoes, networking can be as simple as looking at people who went to your undergrad or went to your law school, reaching out over email and saying, hey, I'm really interested in the area of law that you practice. And as a fellow Cal Bear, I would just love if we could hop on a quick 15-minute call to learn about your practice and what you do. And now you can build a rapport with the person. You can actually learn truly about what it is they do to see if it's interesting to you. And it really shows that you have initiative, that you're proactive, that you care. And ideally in these phone calls and these coffee sessions, coffee chats, however it is that you talk to these folks, you slide in there just a little comment about how you're considering doing something at their firm if there is an opportunity as a 1L summer law clerk, or as a 1L in-house, or as a 1L judicial extern. And even if they can't help you, at least the seed's been planted. So in a month later, they might throw an opportunity your way. Hey, we don't have anything at our firm, but check this guy out. He's a buddy of mine and he might have an opportunity. So don't underestimate the power of networking and just getting your name out there. I know it can feel demoralizing, discouraging, and almost like you're like mining for gold and you're just coming up short every single time. But that's really the process. You got to have faith that eventually you will get a little nugget of gold. Eventually, one of these opportunities will flower up into something. Whether that's for your 1L summer or whether it's something 10 years down the line, you never know. Talk to your law school Office of Career Services and work with them really closely. Just be unashamed in how you ask them for help. Hey, can you send me 15 different options for this? Can you help review my cover letter? Can you look at my resume? Don't be afraid. They literally work for you. So definitely leverage them and extract all that information from them as much as you can. All right, everybody. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, week, month. And by the way, if you're a recent law student or you're in law school or you've recently graduated, I'd love if you could throw down some advice and some input and maybe things that I missed or I got wrong, because I ain't perfect. The more perspective is always welcomed and helpful here. So throw any input you guys have down in the comments to help this next generation of lawyers get the best opportunities for themselves. Thank you. Take care. I'll see you next time.